associated access track, hard standing area, substation, control room, building compound, borrow pits, mast and temporary site storage compound on land including Davidstow Woods and adjacent fields to the southwest. That's the Crowdy area. Whichever way you look at it, this is a major, well, whichever way you look at it, literally it's a major development within the setting of Bodmin Moor. Therefore, we felt as a parish council it was really important to let everybody have an opportunity to tell us what you think. Before we start, just a couple of ground rules. Please respect each other's points of view and don't interrupt, let people talk. And the other thing I ask is that when you do speak, you tell us if you belong to an organisation or a group, or tell us where you come from. So if you're from Davidstow or Camelford, let us know. We're going to take a few notes, and all of this is going to help us when we look at the planning application at our next meeting. This meeting is for you, so I'm going to open the floor to you. So who wants to start? Thank you. I thought we were going to have such. Please carry on.
Sean Kay, stand up. Please stand up.
Oh, and please stand up.
Sean Kay, private resident. I overlook all this from Trenath, just outside Camelford. I'd like to know when no means no. Yeah.
I suppose I should have added that I'm expecting lots of people to have lots of questions. Please don't expect us as a parish council to have the answers. I'm sure that there are people here who will have the answers to some of the questions. No is no.
Has this not already gone through planning? Has it not already been refused? How many times are we going to have to do this?
Yes. Yes.
Three. I think it's come up because I think they just lost the planning application down the borders to Scotland, and they've come back to Cornwall because they think it's an early, easy touch. I mean, that's exactly what they had last time with the Strategic Planning Committee. They were an easy touch, and that's why they've come back.
Thank you. Yes.
Hammondbridge Scott Davidstow wind farm, and I couldn't agree with you more than what you said. And actually, if you go online and look at the consultee comments against this proposal from RSPB, National Trust, Cultural Heritage, AOAB, they are saying exactly the same as you. And they are asking them again, why are you submitting exactly the same incorrect, misleading information that you've submitted each time? And I think it's time actually that Cornwall Council perhaps answered these questions instead. Because if it were you submitting an application for your house, I assure you it would be thrown out. And I think it's time Cornwall Council took this on board and stopped costing us all a tremendous amount of money, time and effort. It's cost us all money to come here today. This is the third time we've all had to do this. We don't want it. Can you please stop it? I think it's quite fair.
Yes, no, there's a lady at the back.
Can I just ask, we did 788 meetings from what will be the nearest thereby. Looking at the pictures that have been taken of our property and the documentation that have been taken from such a doctored angle, they haven't even bothered to take a picture of our property looking towards the turbines. How can they get away with submitting such inaccuracies? And that's one of many.
I just wondered if it was being minuted, the meeting.
We are taking
Questions, everybody's questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Scott Mann. I'm Cornwall Councillor for Weybridge West, and I'm parliamentary candidate for North Cornwall for the Conservatives. I sat on the original application this lady referred to a second ago on the Strategic Committee, and I voted for refusal of the application. I can't understand why we're building all these large wind turbines in Cornwall. I think it's a blight on our landscape, and it's a massive problem for our tourist industry at the moment. It's about time we said no to central government and we started sorting this out for the people of Cornwall.
Mr. Boyd.
If
I could make a comment that what is said in support of this wind farm is that it is power that is free. It's green and it's clean. Well, if you look into the manufacture of the turbines themselves, this involves an enormous amount of carbon dioxide being released into the atmosphere. I can't give you the figures, but several tons of cement takes a long time to make up that CO2. But, as we all know, when the wind does not blow, as it did for some weeks earlier this year, something else has to be drawn upon or everything goes kaput. Hospitals, traffic lights, everything. And what is that? It's a very expensive turbine-driven gas generation, which they have to pay double the price for, just to keep the wind turbines in the picture. So it's a negative as far as saving the planet is concerned. Now, if I could just do, after those introductory remarks, this company is called Community Wind Power. And they have demonstrated their feelings about the community by substituting or massaging the figures. If you look into the small details of their environmental impact assessments and so on, it is obvious that they have just inserted figures to make things look better for themselves. That is treating the community with scorn. That's what they think of the community. We can alter these figures as we will to get this wind farm in operation. So I agree with the gentleman here, Karen, who said that the council has spent thousands of pounds on the processing of this planning application, and they need to be told we're not going to go on doing it. Thank you.
Well said.
In agreement with the previous gentleman. Are there any representatives from Be Green here tonight to answer our question?
Yes, I think. Ron? Ron, where are you, Ron? Oh, Ron. Ron, you want to come and sit up and, I sort of didn't invite Ron to have to take questions, but if he's happy, do you want to come and sit up here?
No, he wants to hide.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Ron Muckleston. He's from the Be Green in Camelford. He didn't know he was going to have to sit here and answer questions, and if he can, I'm sure he will, but sorry to sort of put you on the spot, but if you're happy to do that, please. Right up, but yes. Okay.
Wendy Carn, Camelford, Bar of the Cornish Corset. I've got a letter from the Grand Bard if anybody wants to read it afterwards, so I won't read it all out.
Do you mind sort of facing everybody else and they can hear you?
Camelford, Brenda Carn and the Bard of the Corset. I've got 4 questions I would like to ask Be Green. Up till last December, there was displayed a notice in the shop claiming that Davidstow Woods was a greenfield site. What made them change their mind? Question 1. Brownfield site, I'm sorry, brownfield site. That seems to have disappeared. Which I think is the example of the sort of weasel words that we seem to be using. Community benefits. I wrote to the I wrote to them in January asking how they based the figures and could they give examples of the figures that were paid out to other sites in England, Northern England, where they've got big running. And I had a letter back which I can't find the article. Saying, well, in fact, they haven't anything going up in Northern England or North West England or North East England. They've got 3 sites in Scotland, and they will be sending me the figures shortly. Well, that was February I heard from them. I've heard nothing since. In their letter, they said 2 contrary things. One, that the Scottish figures were not available, and 2, that they would let me know when they got it all together, but they hadn't quite got it all together. So, yes, the MOD, which is likely to object to this, if it doesn't object, is likely to want not just the visible effect of the windmills, but it's likely to want red warning lights on top of each of the towers. So we'll have 16 Carolyn Hills. You all know what Carolyn Hill looks like. There's no test one, so we're going to have 16. They'll have to have some safety reasons. I'm not sure whether the lights would be at the top of the towers or on each blade as it fizzles around. On the top of the
Back at the fire.
I'll sit down. The Duke of Cornwall surely ought to be involved in this. I mean, he's our local landlord, member of royalty, so to speak. Has he been consulted? Because I've heard not a word that he might have said, or surely he ought to be asked for his views on the proposal, because he's got a record of support for conservation in the countryside.
That's a very good question.
Should the Duke of Cornwall will be asked his opinions, as he's so keen on the countryside? I've seen no record of anything said by him or after. That's why the question is.
If you want to, yeah. Ron's going to answer.
Right, there were 3 points that I can deal with. I can't deal with Prince Charles, unfortunately. I don't know whether he has been. I'll deal with the 3 points. The brownfield site, that wording was, I believe, withdrawn because of your letter, Brenda.
Was wrong, sorry?
It was withdrawn because of your letter about it.
Oh, right.
That's as I understand it.
Still on display.
With regard to the community benefit, what's happened elsewhere really is immaterial. I know people are using the fact that there hasn't been a lot of community benefit paid out elsewhere, but already they have paid out over £116,000 in loans and grants and gifts in the Camelford area. They have. Sorry, if I can finish, please, Karen.
Hang on, just one moment. Please let Ron finish.
They have promised that the net profit from one of the 16 turbines will actually be turned over in full to a trust fund. That trust fund will be guaranteed a minimum of £240,000 per year during the operation of the wind farm. What will happen to that money will be up to the trustees, not Community Wind Power. And the point about red warning lights, as someone's mentioned, there have been previous applications and the MOD have not mentioned red lights once. As far as I'm aware, they are not wanting red lights.
Can I just, before anybody else speaks, can I just say, as a parish council, and I think I can speak for all of the other councils, that financial benefits are not a planning consideration. We will not be discussing any funds that might or might not be available.
All structures over a certain height have to have a red light on them for low-flying aircraft. And Davidstow Airfield is designated as a low-flying airfield. It's still operational.
It was the gentleman was saying that because of the height, they would be required to have a warning light as an operational airfield. Gentlemen.
Yeah, I read that one tonight from it. They've got to have one turbines only for nationals. I'm not sure if you can visually see them, but they've got to have it for the aircraft.
Jamie Taylor from us at Davidstow. There's a big windmill at Reading, a very big one, and it costs more to run it than the energy put out. So is that going to be the same thing up here? So where's the profit going to need to go in that fund?
Sometimes you do get rogue wind turbines. Sometimes they don't work. One of the considerations that Community Wind Power had was to actually allocate a specific wind turbine to the community fund. But I advised against that because if, for one reason, if it failed, there wouldn't be any money. They have guaranteed a minimum of £240,000. So even if all the wind turbines broke down, they would still pay that £240,000. And in fact, they do insure against failure.
This lady here. Thank you.
Hello, Anita Wilson, business in Marketstow, tourism business. This wasn't actually the point I wanted to make, but I think I can answer some of these questions because I've been onto the Company's House website and I've been on the Company's House website and the credit check website and looked into the company. On their website, their own website, they say that whilst the application is in planning, we remain in communication with local communities. Well, clearly not. I feel sorry for you having to face this lot, but I'll get on to your job in a minute. The company, whose name I've lost now, Community Wind Power, is one of 11 subsidiaries of Company Wind Power Holdings Limited. Each one of those subsidiaries seems to own a small wind farm or one or two turbines between Scotland and Cornwall. When you look at their individual profit reports, they don't look too healthy, but the holding company, unsurprisingly, seems to have £26 million of shareholders' funds ready for distribution according to its 2012 accounts. So I think the idea that we can expect a share of any profits is pretty remote because I can't prove this, but I am a business person, and I think what happens is that as soon as the companies are up and running, the small community companies suddenly start being absorbed up into the holding company, which is run from Edinburgh. Most of the employees are in Edinburgh. The whole organisation employs less than 50 people across the country. And I noticed that Camelford, one other shop, which I can't tell you where it is at the moment, and hang on, there are 4 B Green shops in the UK, Camelford, Lancashire and 2 in Scotland. So I suspect that as soon as they get their planning consent, if they do, that the B Green shop will be closing. They've allocated £15,000 so far to Camelford, which compared to their profits is pretty measly, really. They seem to think we can be bought off really cheaply down here.
You can't be brought off at all.
Well, I know that. One thing I would just like to say, I actually came to talk about tourism, but I won't bore you with that at the moment. I dropped in to see Dan Rogerson today. He wasn't there, but I do have a meeting with him. He's holding a surgery here on Saturday morning, and he seems to have quite a lot of slots vacant as of this morning. Because, as people have said, this really needs to be dealt with at a county level and possibly the government level, because we're being asked to come up with £89 million worth of frontline funding cuts from our council, and yet we're having to waste money time and time again on these kind of planning applications. It's absolutely diabolical that this money's been siphoned out of the county, and it will actually stop us from doing our own private projects because the grid won't be able to cope with anything that we might want to produce for our own ends and to reduce our own carbon footprint and our own bills in an area which has already got European funding, because it's one of the poorest areas in the county and is likely to be suffering from fuel poverty issues. And we really need to stop commercial organisations just draining the county dry of our wind energy. If it really was a community project, which I noticed the one in Laddock has just been refused in planning permission, a true community wind project which was going to put £2 million into the actual community, and that's been turned down. We really need to take a stand. But what the lady said to me today at Dan Rogerson's office was, when people write and complain, they tend to talk about the view, and that means nothing in the planning process. We really need to look at, and I do actually have some, if anyone wants me to email them to them. There are elements of the Cornwall local plan, the council sustainability appraisal plan, the habitat regulations assessment, and the national planning policy framework, which I think quite clearly make an absolute mockery of this application. But that is the level we need to address. If everyone here address a complaint on that basis, I don't think the council could possibly ignore it. But the lady at Dan Rogerson's office said, as long as, upsetting as it is about our view and our beautiful area, if that's the level we try to fight on, we will lose. So, thank you.
Bob Harris from Breward. I think there's a point here that is not correct, actually. New guidance was issued in mid-June, which says that planning applications must take account of, one or the other at least, of visual matters. It wasn't in before, and I think also the matter about community consultation. So two things are now in. So that's in the last 4 or 5 months. Again, so you, in fact, the visual side has to be considered. We can insist it wasn't before. That's new guidance this year, and so that would strengthen the case against this. I would have thought. So visuals are a major thing. Apart from the tourism or the whole economic argument and various other arguments, the visual impact is pretty important. And this is a staggering visual impact. It must, presumably, it's not in the AONB, but of course it will have a huge visual impact into the AONB. And I'd have thought that would kill it in any case.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very true. It's landscape character and visual impact, but the caveat is still that it's to be balanced with the strategic good, i.e. government targets for wind power and for solar power in that case. So there's for every proclamation about these things, there's always a caveat, and that's where they catch us out all the time.
Could I ask the gentleman from the company what money they are paying the council to put in the application again? It must have been paid for the applications we resubmitted.
I honestly don't know. If I did know,
In excess of £3,000.
They get a free go. Okay. And the second question I'd like to ask is why Dan Rogerson isn't here this evening? Because this is in his patch, it is a vital issue.
He's not allowed to get involved in individual planning applications, or he's
Just come and listen to public opinion.
I'd like to comment on that. It's not that he's not allowed to, he won't. He has always said that he won't get involved with planning, and it's just that he is backing the Lib Dem path, and they're all for renewable energy. That's the fact of the matter. It's nothing to do with some policy of some illegality or anything like that. It's the way he is, and he's always been quite awkward about this. But I don't want to say this, but you can frighten him to death if you start all saying that you're not going to vote with Lib Dem. you know, and you actually get on right to him as well as object to this. He does start to get quite worried, and that's what we've got to do, because he's so complacent. He just sits on the fence and he goes to Bob or someone, picks up a baby, and that's all you hear.
Everybody's on top of the thing.
Jeff Matthews, I live at Friday Cottage, which is right in front of this development. I have 2 new barns that I've put a lot of money into, which aren't included in the application in any way, the visual impact assessment. But those visual impact assessments are wrong from what I can see. But I think somebody here will probably have some more to say about it. The thing that worries me most about this is the divisiveness that it brings to communities. And this relates just directly at this community benefit, so-called. Because there is no question that whilst you may say you don't take this into account in your planning, what does happen, and I can confirm that this is the case, although I won't go into detail, basically people who aren't perhaps directly affected or feel reasonably positive about wind farms and perhaps believe that they actually work, which I personally don't as an electrical engineer, but what happens is that they feel that supporting the green argument is great, but also the community will get a lot of money from it. Well, that it automatically divides the community, creates quite serious splits inside the community. And I feel, as somebody that's lived in this country for all my life, that something's wrong with our standards. This is blackmail, by no other word, and it is entirely wrong. And I think to suggest that we will receive £240,000 of our own money back because we're paying it in the bills that Mr. Miliband has decided we So as far as I'm concerned, it's that aspect that concerns me most. But I am absolutely with all the other issues on views, the fact they don't work, they take loads of money, and we will also hear the Camelford Waterworks all the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Camelford, I don't know if anybody can answer this. The last planning that was put in, the air traffic control people who've got the radio station at Davidstow objected to it. Since then, the RAF or the Navy at Cold Rose have said that one turbine at Cold Rose would stop the helicopters flying. So they're going to put 16 huge things at Davidstow. How's that going to affect air traffic control that controls all the planes going to the Americas? I've no idea. But as I say, that was one of the considerations that was looked at when it was refused the last time.
Sorry, did I hear somebody say that the air traffic control have objected? Yes. Okay, thank you. Colin?
No, I was just going to say, National objected, they've come over the radar.
David Mather, higher grade 8 College Advent. The nearest proposed turbine is 788 metres behind my house. All 16 would take up a 90-degree panorama from my property. Following up on what Jeff said about visual impact survey provided by the applicant, they've made the assumption that it will make no impact on my property. Stating that only glimpses of the turbines will be seen from the majority of my windows, assuming that we spend every daylight hour within the house. And for sure, if those turbines go up, that's what we'll have to do.
Listen, can I just ask you a question? Did they actually enter your property to take photographs at all?
They did not.
Yes, they did.
Did they?
It's just that I've looked online, and from what I could see, I couldn't actually see the view from a particular window. It was a kind of a side photo of a property with a pictorial representation of what it may look like.
They didn't actually take a picture facing where the turbines would be. They took it to the left, they took it to the right.
Okay, so that's quite a significant admission then.
My second point, if you indulge me, 120 years ago, people stopped using wind turbines because they didn't work. The sole purpose of wind farms isn't to harvest wind, it's to harvest government subsidies. What I'd like to ask is, what would happen if the government subsidies were withdrawn?
End of story. We've heard enormous amounts about how
Sorry, can you say who you are, please? Tell us who you are.
My name is Richard Vivian Robinson. I represent the Camel Valley and Bodmin Moor Protection Society. What we've got to do, having heard the enormous number of things against this application, is how we're going to fight it. Now, our society, we have about 200 members roughly in this area and around the moor. They've been extremely kind, and they've enabled us to actually take professional advice on how to oppose this application. We have got a planning consultant, and under his advice we have got a landscape expert who will run an audit on the environmental impact assessment. We have a man called Mr. Davis, who apparently is an expert in noise. We have Dr. Tim Reed, who's doing an ecology survey, which will be put against the developers that survey. And we have another expert who's going to discuss energy and benefits. I'm very grateful to our members who've provided the finance, because all these characters are quite expensive. And so it's fine, we have the money, that's what we're going to do, and from that we should be writing a professional objection on behalf of the society. Now, what can everybody else do to back this up? Well, I last night I got onto that dreaded website, the council's, and I noticed there were 141 comments, and roughly 135 of them were objections. And among those objections, you've already heard the National Trust, which is great because they're not always on our side. They have to be this time because this writer, which is National Trust, up the top there, which some of you I'm sure all know, there is a war memorial to the 43rd Wessex, which was set up by Sir Richard Onslow, who gave the land to the National Trust. There's an objection from the borough, the RSPB. They cite Para 118 of the National Planning Policy Framework. The AONB Partnership also object. English Heritage commented, they asked for further details before they make up their mind. Natural England also objects. If you want to see how to write an objection, they're brilliant. It's wonderful. It's not actually, it wasn't on the website, but it will be very shortly now. Parish Council. The first Parish Council to form an objection is all to none. That one's in. And I'm hoping that the others all around the moor will put it in, put their in. This is incredibly important because Mr. Pickles, bless him, has said, sent out a dictum that localism is to count. And all the planning inspectors, the planning system, must take account of local people. So local people has more weight than it did. So therefore we want the parish councils, who are in most cases elected, to write objections, and we want everybody else to write objections, even if there's one sentence. I was going to suggest how you do this, because some people find the website, the Cornwall Council website, rather difficult. It is. What I would suggest is that you send an email sent Pevin an email and started off and say for Tim Warne, Mr. Tim Warne, who is the case officer, and then for the application number, and you all know that, presumably, PA13 /03743.
Tell us again, please. Say that again, please.
PA13
Yeah.
/03743. Davidstow Wind Farm.
Thank you.
And then you send it to planning@cornwall.gov.uk.
It's planning dots.
Everybody happy?
Planning dots.
What?
It's planning dots. Cornwall.gov.uk.
Planning, that's right. Like that, isn't it? What? We've got to put a dot in, or planning@cornwall.gov.uk. The person is the case officer, Mr. Tim Warne, W-A-R-N-E. Sorry, I'm down to the post.
cut-off date.
Well, the official cut-off date was the 4th of October, but he can't do it by then, and I have professional advice that it won't be way out, it'll probably be in December, because there is plenty of time. And also the same person suggested we won't actually get a decision until probably very early in the new year. That's it. Thank you very much. What?
Can I do this word? It's just add to that. You can send it snail mail. You don't have to email. So if there's anybody here, just send it to Cornwall County Council, County Hall, Planning Office, and exactly the same details as Richard was just in colour doing. Snail mail works.
Thank you. Can I just ask a quick question? We've had quite a few people come to us as the parish council saying they are having a lot of difficulty getting online to make their representation. Is that happening? Okay, thank you. Because I think we need to take that back to council. Yes. Oh, sorry. This gentleman. Okay.
My name's Abigail Kirby Harris. I'm married to this chap who knows that they've got to take into account visual impact, aesthetic considerations and community views. But we're also members of the Camel Valley Protection Society, and we contributed a couple of years ago to the special fighting fund that we set up to oppose the last application. And I really feel that it's now time. You've got a county councillor for Camelford, there are 2 in Wadebridge, they're all around. If you voted for them, they should be listening to you, and our MP as well. And you've got to go beyond us having meetings in parish councils where they want to object because all their residents want them to, and then we're completely ignored further up the line, and it costs us a lot of money. The county council doesn't seem to have any budgetary constraints at all. And I think really, please, whether you voted for them or not, go to your MPs and county councillors and tell them that this nonsense of constantly reapplying by big wealthy companies has really got to be put a stop to.
We do have a couple of county councillors here. They may well declare that we'll have to declare themselves in a minute.
Stephen Russell from Wadebridge. Firstly, I just want to say one thing in defence of Cornwall County Council, is that everybody has the right to put in a planning application, and they have a statutory duty to determine that application. Whether they do it in the right way or the wrong way is another matter, but they have to do that, so the cost element of what you're saying doesn't come into it. 2 points really, or a few points I want to make. As well as visual impact, that is a big thing. It's what you should all put in your objections, and also noise. And you've got to point out to the planners that when they take their noise readings, they do them in the day when there's lots of background noise. You know, for people living on the moors, it's the ambient temperature, it's the nighttime temperature, and it's the noise at night that will affect you. And I think, again, put all that there together. Don't do a standard letter and everybody just signs it and sends it on, because that doesn't mean anything you're planning to do. Hundreds of individual letters stating different points and not coming from the same point of view means they've got to go through them and they've got to consider every single one. If you send in 1,000 letters just signed the same person, written in the same way, it just doesn't mean anything. I would like to touch on tourism, because I wish you would have said what you were doing, because I think tourism is getting pretty close to the tipping point. You know, they say, oh, we go around and we survey the people, but the people who don't like the wind turbines, they can't survey them because they're not here. You know, they've got to remember that. And on the financial benefit, this is the biggest application in Cornwall. It produces the most megawatts. 250 or 240,000 sounds a lot of money, but it's no different pro rata to every other wind turbine if you add them all together. So don't be put off the fact that they're going to give you 250,000, but they can probably afford to give you more than that in comparison to every other wind turbine application. And the last thing I would like to say is on renewable energy, if you look on the council's website, there's an application in for a 4-acre diesel turbine generating station to cover the generation when the wind turbines can't go. You know, if all the wind turbines have been approved and the solar sites have been approved in Cornwall, we've already hit our 2019 target. You know, and if we do any more, they should be community ones. You know, unfortunately, Cornwall Council and its enthusiasm to be the greenest council gave away all the grid connections and all the points, so all the money goes out of Cornwall. If you have to have any of these wind turbines, the money should stay in Cornwall.
I think the gentleman has got a couple of good points, but what was the gentleman from the council here? I think there was a gentleman at the front asked when no means no. And if they have knowledge of the planning process within Cornwall Council planning can obviously see this as an identical planning application to those submitted before, which were refused. So why do they continue to allow an identical planning application to continue? I'm not involved in tourism, like this lady up here, but I recently visited the countryside in Leicestershire. Now, Leicestershire is a pretty open county, lots of wind, at least as much wind as pretty much anywhere else. There's almost no turbines in Leicestershire. And I came back to Cornwall and I realised with absolute horror what is happening to Cornwall. I cannot drive anywhere in this county without being inflicted with a huge turbine in my view. And it's got to stop.
I would beg to differ with the county councillor in terms that there's nothing to be done, because there could be something that was done if Cornwall developed an overall strategy for dealing with both solar applications and with wind farm applications. There is no strategy at the moment. If there was a strategy, then yes, that could be defined to stop repeated applications in specific areas. The other thing is that perhaps there is something that you can do in the future, because if you are going to do a local plan, then you can look at a community energy, renewable energy section in that plan. Really, if localism is going to stand for it, as you know, as they talk about, you know, localism running through you like a stick of rock, then that actually means taking the future, looking at localism, using it for yourself, and doing a local plan. That will protect you in the future. You can't rely on anything else.
I've got other people who want to speak.
Rob Rotchell, Camelford, Cornwall Councillor for Camelford, and also on Town Council as well. I was chairman of Camelford Town Council when the first application for this wind farm came in, and it's a matter of record that the Town Council rejected the application unanimously. We've delayed the discussions on this particular application till after tonight, because it was important yet again that we took the view of the people of Camelford, and consistently it hasn't changed in one jot whatsoever. That Town Council meeting is a week tonight. in Camelford Hall here, and unless something remarkable happens between now and then, I can't see there being a change in the council's position. It would be remiss of me at this point to say how I'm going to vote, but if you look on the council records, you can see how I voted last time.
Speak up.
Sorry, calling was loud enough. Hi, Caroline Nabben. I happen to know a guy who's a retired National Grid engineer, and I've been talking to him because I've heard people say, well, we need all this green energy in Cornwall so we can be self-sufficient in power, or things like if Hinkley Point goes down, we'll be fine. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that because of the way the National Grid is built. Two things he told me. Firstly, if the National Grid, or any part of it crashes down, all the wind turbines are actually not allowed to export power into the grid because engineers can be working on the lines and they have to be not live. So you know, if the main power goes down, everything has to be off, or you could fry an engineer. And the other thing is, when the National Grid has gone down, or whether substation trips or whatever, you know, particularly if a large section goes down, there are only certain power stations that are appropriate in engineering terms for relighting the grid. You actually, there's a particular design of power station, you know, don't ask me the details, but it has to be the right sort of power station to get the grid back up. And wind turbines are not the right engineering to get the grid back off the ground. So, you know, however many turbines we have, if the power station goes down, we won't have any power.
Can I just say about that? It's a bit simpler than that, actually. Sorry, it's a bit simpler than that. If Cornwall needs a gigawatt of energy, and we've only got a few hundred megawatts of wind power, how can it ever power us if the grid goes down? It's simple as that. It's not necessarily the worry of frying people, because you would be, if the grid goes down, you'd be asking Cornwall to power the rest of the country. You can't do that, it's just irrelevant. The thing about this, what they call a back startup, is I believe down at St Dennis, which is an oil-fired power station, that they're used for moderating the grid and also for what they call black startups. When the grid goes down, they need to get something to synchronise. All the turbines need the mains electricity to synchronise our supply. So they cannot work without being connected to the grid. So that's as simple as that. The other thing, I did talk to the engineer a few years ago at the St Dennis power station, and he said, when we were talking about having 100 megawatts of wind energy in Cornwall, and I said to him, all the big power stations that are producing gigawatts around the grid, how do they respond to the wind power in Cornwall? What level of power do we need? And he says, well, we need to have at least 100 megawatts steady. If you drop just 100 megawatts out, we're not going to change our power settings. We can't afford to because we don't know what the wind energy is going to do. So, it's just not going to work.
Jeremy Hooper, St Breward. I'm also a member of the Camel Valley and Bobbing Moors Protection Society. I got some figures out tonight from a mathematician to show how irrelevant this amount of electricity which will be produced really is. And I gather that the figures which are inaccurate are provided by the developer's website, so you can read into them what you like. But the developer website estimates there will be 48 megawatts per annum. This is produced by the site at a 30% load factor. They estimate this saves approximately 154,000 tons of CO2 per annum. That sounds an awful lot. But when you look at it in reality to what the nation produces, the UK CO2 emissions are 570 million. megawatts per annum, and that is 1.6% of the global emissions. Therefore, Davidstow's site is producing 0.009% of UK emissions, if it's granted. So in other words, it's 9 thousandths of the UK emissions. And the figures of UK emissions are probably doctored as well. They come from the Department of Energy. To produce 1% of the UK's annual emissions, it would need 105 projects of Davidstow size. And really, for someone to talk about Prince Charles, do we want this for a carbuncle on Bodmin Moor? Unbelievable. It is irrelevant. We're paying through the nose. Your electricity bill is funding this. It will go up hundreds. Even now, it will go up hundreds. And all I can say is that from the mood of this meeting, Julie, I don't know if you're taking a vote tonight, but it would be very persuasive if the politicians of all colours and ranks see what the view is, because there may be somebody here who is very green and wants it to be very, very badly stayed. I'll leave that to you.
One point that hasn't been picked on, the windmill that's gone up on Davidstow in the last couple of weeks. Sorry, the windmill that's gone up on Davidstow in the last couple of weeks directly faces my lounge, and I've constantly got a flashing light during the day in my eyes. So what 16's going to do in the vicinity of those people overlooking at it, I don't know. It's not good. That one light flashing gives me a headache, so the whole thing's going to be burnt.
Tessa Ann Wiley at Ballytruckle. Just to follow on from what the gentleman over there said about coming back into the county and being aware of how many wind farms. As it happened about 2 weeks ago, we climbed up onto the top of Router. It was a beautiful day, the visibility was really good. I stood up there and I took a 360-degree view all the way around, and at no point did I stop and not see a turbine. Every position I stopped at, there was at least one turbine to be seen. Surely we have our fair share in North Yorkshire. We don't need any more. We're just blighting what we have. It's the most perfect view, and we should really look after this. The moor is something very, very special, and if we allow people just to ride roughshod over it and put these hideous turbines on there, we'll never get them taken away, no matter how much we argue. Once they're up, they're up. We've got to live with that.
Sorry. Talking about turbines being divisive, who in this area has got the authority and the know-how to distribute 240,000 to any kind of community or charity, or it's just going to make people so angry, even angrier than they are now. And that's my point.
First thing is anybody going to recompense us for the loss of value in our houses? This is what the gentleman's garden down there. There is a proven point now. The government agency finally admits that thousands can be wiped off value of homes. In fact, the council tax is being reduced in certain areas because of this. That's one thing. Another thing I read recently, plans for future wind farms in Britain could be in jeopardy after United Nations Legal Tribunal ruled that the UK government acted illegally by denying the public decision-making powers over their approval and necessary information over their benefits or adverse effects. This means consents and permissions in future are liable to challenge on the grounds that the necessary preliminaries have not been complied with, and that the public have been denied a chance to consider and contribute to National Renewable Action Plan. Yes, the next one. The other one was that. And what about health? I mean, they have been proven to affect our health. It's not just the noise. They can cause migraine and all sorts of things here. I've got it written down. Headaches, palpitations, excessive tiredness, stress, anxiety, tinnitus, hearing problems, sleep disturbance, migraines and depression. I mean, all those things we can get. I mean, you feel that already. Yes, just from one. Just from one. So what's 16 going to do? Thank you.
Nobody is, sorry, I'm the chairman of the South West Riders Cornwall Group. Sorry. Chairman of the South West Riders Cornwall Group. Riders, horse riding. Nobody ever seems to think that people, what they ride horses, what will the turbines do to them? Nothing. They say, okay, they don't. Once the turbines are moving, fine, they're okay. We have one at Lanny's Moor. It started up, my husband was riding on the bridleway, the horse bolted. And luckily he was aboard and not a friends who can't ride very well, because there would have been a serious accident. Not only that, when the turbines go round, if the sun is shining through the turbine onto the horse, they see the shadow coming across their head. They're terrified. They don't mind the wind turbines, but they're terrified of the shadowing. And I see by the map here that even if you're riding on the road, you'll probably get this happen with your wind turbines, especially with 16 of them. They're sure to be shining somewhere onto a road or onto a moor where somebody could be riding a horse.
Sorry, it's Roy Holland. Somebody might have heard me on Radio Cornwall. I like to make my views known. It was mentioned about the devaluation of properties. This is perfectly true. They do go down in value. But what I'd also like to mention is that not just people in Cornwall are complaining about Cornwall getting all these turbines, but visitors. Because where I live, up in Davidstow, I often get a knock on the door and ask where Port Wen is. Apart from that, one chap from Birmingham, who had a Birmingham accent, said, "Are your posters true?" I said, "Yes, I have been since they first proposed them." He said, "Well, where are they going to put them?" And when I pointed out where they were, he says, "How dare they?" He says, "We come down here to look at the countryside, the landscape and everything." He said, "And these people want to come down here and ruin the landscape?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "They've only got their own pockets to think about." I said, "They don't care about the locals here. And most of the locals do not want these heaps of junk." And I keep on saying this, but nobody in power seems to listen. Especially our wonderful MP. He ignores emails, and I am getting a little tired of him. He is, as someone said, a mugwump. He sits with his mug on one side and rump on the other. But it's hopeless trying to get through to these so-called leaders of our society. Thank you very much.
I think just picking up what Mr. Holland said, I think one of the major problems that we have with wind turbines and wind power in general, as well as countries when it's wedded to Europe and insistent on remaining wedded to Europe, we are being bound by what they require of us, not what we as English people or British people living here want. Irrelevant of where we came from, it's not a speech about where we came from, because a lot of us, if we look back in our history of immigrants from somewhere, then but this should be us making these decisions, not people that are well outside of our sphere of view. These turbines are within our sphere of view, and they're not. And they don't care. They just impose what they require of Britain, and it's not right.
No, that's like.
It seems to me that there actually isn't anybody in this hall who supports this. Is there anybody that supports it? 141 objections on the site at the moment, and there are a lot more than 141 people in here. So I really hope that, you know, we can sit here all night, we all agree, I think, and talk about these issues. The important thing is that we do something about it. And what we must do is object, every single one of us. I'm not actually sure if it matters, but on another wind farm, I looked at the list of objections and I noticed 3 or 4 people had objected more than once. And my guess is that if you can find some other reason that you haven't said before, stick another one. So we can perhaps give them something to think about. But if anybody here doesn't know how to object, then I suggest, my name is Jeff at greylanecottage.co.uk. Send me an email and I'll show you how to use the website. I mean that.
I'm Brian Craven, I live at Tragadillet. I've been bird watching at Davidstow Parish since 1976 at least. So I know the area pretty well. So I'm not local, but I know the area. Several things I'd like to know. I'd like to know from the only green person in here who professes one, why the subtle changes in the application. Why the number of turbines has changed. Why they've just moved a few metres. Why we keep going at that. Do you know why they keep going at it? You speak to them more than we do. There must be a reason for these subtle changes. They're moving these poles around. They moved one right near the birdwatching hive.
No. So they can resubmit the application.
Just claims are slightly different from before.
Can I answer?
And also, I've got so many questions. I've got so many questions I could spend all night.
Do you want Ron to answer that one? Try and answer.
Yeah, let him answer that one.
I wasn't actually involved in the decision on what changes were made, but we did consult in this very hall, amongst other places, the local people who wanted to come along as to whether we should have smaller turbines, but more of them, or 16, in fact it was 15 I think at the time, but we increased it to 16.
Did you advertise this in the window in your big green shop?
Yes. Sorry?
Did you advertise this meeting?
Yes, we also sent out press releases, we held meetings with any representative from the parish councils within a 10-mile radius. If they wanted to send someone, they could do so, and quite a few did. I believe that Davidstow actually sent someone.
Yes, it was me.
It was you?
Yes. And I did put forward objections to these new plans as the other plans.
Objections are passed on. I should be passing on what's happened tonight to the owners of the company. But to be honest, I cannot foresee that they will do anything other than let the legal planning course take its rightful course.
Surely you must know why they keep going at this application.
Well,
They know that everyone is against it.
I will answer as I did at the Advent parish meeting, where there were actually a few other people who had the courage to say yes, they didn't object to it, including the chair. I said my personal opinion is if there wasn't money in it, they wouldn't do it. The fact is, we as a company do not control government policy. Government policy is set and it pays these developers to actually produce energy for them. If they didn't make money out of it, they wouldn't invest their money in it. They'd go and invest in something else. They have,
2020 already met.
that really doesn't have any bearing as far as Cornwall Council's concerned. They will make their decision on planning grounds. I cannot foresee what their decision is going to be.